I've got lots of great questions today. The main question is on 18th century cookbooks. Thanks for joining us today on Questions and Answers with James Townsend and Son. Okay, here we go. Our first question is from Big D Haunter, and he's asked the questions before. This one is, I wonder if these could be, oh, wait a minute. He's on the Pickled Onions episode. He says, I wonder if these could be canned, or would the process change the onion's texture too much? And did they pickle garlic? Can they be canned? Canning is a 19th century thing. They can be canned. I'll put a link down in the description text for a modern canned home recipe that should probably work out, but we haven't tested it. Also, did they pickle garlic? And yes, there's a recipe in the Lady's Assistant by Charlotte Mason, 1787. I'll put a link down in the description text to take you to that recipe. Here's another Pickled Onions question. It's from Jimmy Mead. He says, very nice, John. I am definitely going to try this. It brings to question to mind. We used to get this onion relish at a little shop, and I was wondering if relishes like this were made in the 18th century. If so, I think onion relish or a relish episode would be really great. Well, we did some digging. Relish is kind of a more modern term, and the kind of things we think of as relishes probably aren't very 18th century. They did have some things like, well, at least the British or the English did, chutneys, and what was the other one? A piccalilli. So they had these kind of, chopped up, the relishy kind of things, but not quite what we would think of as a typical relish, and that I doubt came into the Americas as much. That probably stayed as more of an English thing. If anyone out there has any information on a relish type thing that would be used in 18th century Americas, I would love to hear it. So if you've got something, make sure to share that down in the comments. Another Pickled Onions question. I believe this is Seamus 6387. He says, man, that looks good. I love pickled onions. I do make them myself, only the only difference is I soak them the night before, overnight, in salt water instead of adding salt to the vinegar. And the only way to make them is with malt vinegar, in his opinion. So, and the idea of soaking them in salt the night before is something that you do find in some 18th century pickled onion recipes. So, a great idea and very similar to 18th century. Here we go. Here's the next question is on pickled onions, and the person here is on the sound, and he says, how long will they last? The pickled onions, that is. And well, the problem is, we ate them all up, so we have no idea how long they would last, especially at room temperature. If you make them, you want them to last a while, make sure to refrigerate them or can them, as suggested in an earlier question today. This question is from way back in, first or second season, from the meat pie, Cooking 18th Century Meat Pies episode. Carter W. Hearn says, how did you get the pie out of the Dutch oven? You can use a pie lifter. They make these kind of big, long tong things, but I don't think they're very 18th century. I doubt they would have used some strange piece of equipment that only did one thing. I just use welding gloves, and big, heavy leather gloves are the thing to use to reach down on either side of that pie, grab it with your fingertips, and pull it right out. In the first season, we did ash cakes, and we've talked about fire cakes before. And on that video, it's Musketeer in Florida, and he says, I was wondering, could the cake or the ash cake there, could it be placed on the stones ringing the fire? I would think that they would be quite hot and would keep the ashes off the cake. Well, you could, but you know what? If you think about it, the rocks surrounding the fire are probably much dirtier than the ashes. The ashes are sterile, and they don't impart any bad flavor that I had. I didn't have any problem with brushing the ashes off. What little ashes there were did not affect the taste. They're not exactly the super tastiest thing in the world anyway, but the ash did not affect the taste that I found. So, and they would cook a lot faster right there on the ashes. So, hey, cook them on the ashes. That's the way to do it. On the last question and answer one, or the one from last week, the food during war episode, Jason KM4 FPZ asks, he says, I love your videos. And he says, I work in a feed store that was originally a post office in the 19th century. And he talks about finding lots of things that kind of point back to the history of the building. His real question here is, how many of old methods or skills, cooking, farming, tools, etc., do people still use today that are virtually the same as they were in the 18th and 19th centuries? There are a lot of little hidden things that continue to be the same as, things that happened in the 18th and 19th century. But if you really want to find if you want to go back in history and see some of these skills being done just exactly the same way they were 200 years ago, other places around the world are where to do that research or see those things still being done. Certain places in Africa and India, South America, you will find people living virtually exactly the same as they did in the 18th and 19th century. And it's really weird when you'll be looking in Diderots at some old 18th century thing, and there'll be something that you'll see in the news that's just exactly the same happening someplace else in the world. Another question on the Food During War episode. This is from Ezekiel Delacroix. He says, are your videos only applicable to the 18th century Americas? I was wondering if what you say is also accurate for 18th century continental Europe. There's a lot to say about whether what we talk about works in other parts of the world in the 18th century. And really, we kind of narrow in on 18th century English cookbooks and some things that are happening in the Americas, although it's a bit harder to do some of the research for the Americas. There's not quite as much out there. There's still a lot, and we're still kind of learning how to get to that American experience and find the references for that kind of stuff. Some of the things we do carry over into continental Europe easily and perfectly. And then other things are very different regionally. In the last question and answer episode, I was talking about sauerkraut, and it's very popular in parts of continental Europe, and then you get to England and it's not so popular, and you get to America and there's a mix of cultures there between the Germans and the English, and so it's a little bit more popular. So there's a lot of things that you really have to kind of take on a case-by-case basis to figure out whether that works for continental Europe or not. This one's easy. This one's on the egg preservation, and it's Spellwork 1963. He says, what about dipping eggs in wax to keep them airtight, to preserve them? That's not one of the methods that was suggested. It's kind of close to the oil method or the Vaseline method. It's very similar. We didn't necessarily see 18th century references to coating them with wax. Probably 19th century. I would use, say, beeswax is probably the best choice. It's got some antimicrobial properties in it already. Not that we've seen. If you've got any references to wax coating on eggs, I'd love to see them down in the description section. And here's the big question from Sandra Keener, and it's kind of short. She's asking on the Ship's Biscuits episode. She says, do you have cookbooks with these historic recipes, and where can I order one? Wow, we've done some cookbook episodes in the past. There's a lot of references out there. We have cookbooks that we sell on our website. Some of the cookbooks are facsimile copies that are exactly like the 18th century cookbooks. We have them printed on laid paper, and they're bound exactly the way an 18th century cookbook would have been done. So we do have some of those. We also have some more modern cookbooks that are adaptations of historic recipes. So I'll put a link down in the description section that will take you to our cookbook category on our website so you can see what we've got. We also have a really nice online reference I'll give you a link in the description section that will take you to this huge list of free online PDF versions of historic cookbooks. These are all just English cookbooks. Most of them are 18th century, and I think almost all of them are Google ebooks, free ones. There are other ones out there. We just haven't collected the giant list of these other ones yet. But I'll send you there'll be a link to these online cookbooks. And I also have another video where we talked about printing out these free PDF cookbooks and printing services. I'll put a link to the video where we talk about how to get them printed out by sending them off, and you get a printed copy in the mail. And I did have a couple of questions and comments in the past about captions on the videos. We don't go in and hand caption the videos. We haven't had too many questions about that. And it was a butt of many jokes in the past that the YouTube automatic captions were just horrible and very funny to look at. Apparently, they've gotten much better. So if you're interested in captions on our questions and answer videos or our cooking videos, make sure to try out the automatic caption that is available right there on YouTube. You can just click the CC and hopefully that will help you out. I want to thank everyone for all your great comments. There's so many wonderful comments that come out there. They're very encouraging. And I want to thank you for your questions. Keep those questions coming. If you've got questions, make sure to put them down in the comment section below and we will search those out. I look through every single comment, so everything is so welcome. I love seeing all that incoming and other people answering questions. I want to thank everyone for all their great comments and questions, and I really want to thank you for watching. If you're a new viewer and you haven't subscribed, press the subscribe button up here. That'll take you to a spot where you can subscribe. That really is the best way to get notification of all the new videos that are out. I want to thank everyone for watching.